So May of 1954 comes the Brown v. Board of Education ruling. Our last in-service on this, well, we did an in-service 2 months ago, which was broadcast from the Brown v. Board of Education historic site in Topeka, Kansas. Different way of looking at this whole thing. But one of the things I thought was interesting, sometimes when I've looked at the old newspapers, I noticed that newspapers did not realize how important something was when it happened. Well, this wasn't one of those times. Every newspaper that I have found this was screaming this headline at the top of the front page. This was a big deal, and people understood that it was a big deal right off the bat. Not to ask an obvious question, but you were a young man. Do you even remember this? Was this talked about at the dinner table that night?
Believe it or not, we never talked about integrating Clinton High School. It never brought up at my home. I can't speak for the other home, but it was never brought up at my home. Well,
this was the headline, and I mean, it was such a big deal. The McCarthy hearing was recessed. So, and I will point out that, and I'll show you the next slide, immediately Southern governors understood the implications of what we were talking about. The governor of Georgia, the very next day, was threatening to use troops against the United States government. And so right off the bat, we're talking about civil war over a Supreme Court case within 24 hours. So this was not one of these things that it wasn't noticed heavily at the time. And I guess this also tells you about how news coverage has changed. Okay, now we need to explain something, and I did not understand this for a couple of years until finally clarified. Clinton was actually not the first public school in the South to desegregate. We'll have to clarify how this is. In fact, it wasn't even the first public school in Tennessee to desegregate. In fact, it wasn't even the first public school in Anderson County to desegregate, because right across the county from you was Oak Ridge High School. And in the fall of 1955, in the immediate aftermath of the Brown v. Board decision, the public school system of Oak Ridge very quietly integrated. But there's a couple of extremely important points to note here. First of all, Oak Ridge's schools were operated by the Atomic Energy Commission. It might as well have been on a military base. So if protesters had shown up, I don't think it would have gone well, okay? And secondly, there was no buildup and no publicity preceding it. Authorities just did it. And as best I can tell, they didn't even announce it until a month after the school year had started. This is the first time I saw articles about it, and this was in September, late September. I guess I'm gonna ask you about this. This would have been your junior year at Austin. Do you remember hearing much about this?
I knew some of the young men that were attending the school there in Oak Ridge, because they would come up and play basketball up there in our gymnasium. You know, it was not an event by the school, it was just an event by the community that they would come up and play. The thing about Oak Ridge, it was under government installation. So yeah, I knew quite a few of those young men that were going to high school then.
And some of them are no longer young men. Well, none of them are young men. Right. These stories I yanked off the internet that have been done in the last couple of years. There's actually been some attention paid to them. I believe this man here lives in California. Is that Theotis?
I don't know who that is, sir.
Okay. Well, Ray Smith, who's our friend, who's the historian of Oak Ridge, he has a whole presentation on this, and they're now commemorating, I think it's called the Oak Ridge 85.
That's correct. Yes.
But again, when you send in a reporter in 1955 and the reporter does a story that says there wasn't much to talk about here, there really wasn't angry violence and protesting and everything. It really, because we're going to find that the reporters will react completely differently to what happens in Clinton for good reason. Clinton was a different story because the school was run by the Anderson County Board of Education and the state of Tennessee, and because there was a lot of publicity leading up to it, at least enough to draw in people from all over the county. This is June 3rd. This is the first story that I found that was published elsewhere other than just the small town Clinton newspaper that said that Negroes will be attending Clinton High School this year, and it mentions the principal and everything. And so this is another article I found, and this one was published like 2 nights before school started. And if you read it, there's a couple of points here that would shock someone from my generation, particularly these 3 items right here. But Mr. Britton, who is going to play heavily into this story, was explaining that the procedure and how it would work. Said, as far as education is concerned, the students will all be treated equally. And then number 3, we are not going to have mixed social events. You may come, but you may stay in your own group and we will stay in ours. Well, I think that says a lot about the way the year was going to go. Am I right?
Correct. Yes.
Yeah. But I mean, right off the bat, we're going to have school, but you have to stay over there and you can't. With social events, that means homecoming dance. Am I right? Everything.
I never attended any homecoming dances or any dances, whatever, or any events.
Okay. There's a list of names here. These are just lists to me, but these are all friends of yours.
That's correct.
These are your friends.
Yes.
And only 2 of these are seniors. Yourself and
Alfred Williams, Mr. Alfred Williams.
Alfred Williams. We had 2 seniors and then juniors and sophomores, right? No freshmen, because they didn't do freshmen then.
There may have been a freshman there. I can't say. I don't remember. There may have been a freshman.
Okay. But these were all people you'd grown up with.
Correct.
You had a brother and a sister, but they weren't old enough to be going to high school at this time, right?
Not at that time. No, later they did.
One of the many photographs that was taken. Let's go through. I'm going to point. You tell me what their names are. Okay.
Okay.
That's you on the left.
Yes, that's me right there. That's Robert Thacker. That's Maurice Ralston, Gillian Epps, Joanne Allen, Ronald Hayden, Regina Turner, Alfred Williams, and oh goodness, I forget her name. It'll come to me. I apologize. Let me see. It would be Minnie and Dickie. Sorry.
I shouldn't have put you on the spot. The truth is, if you came to if you showed up at my extended family household on Thanksgiving Day and you introduced me to all 12 of these people, I would give you a look like, I can't believe you just said that. I only know 8 of the names, but
I know all of them. I just have forgotten Minnie and Dick. I'm sorry.
Okay. Do you happen to remember? There's so many pictures that were taken. You don't remember why this one wasn't taken on the first day, or was it? Do you remember?
Yeah, I think it was around the first day going to school. Yes.
Okay. It looks like, I think that's the same stuff you're carrying in that famous picture where you're walking into school.
Yes.
Okay. There's 3 of you there. I guess I need to ask, of the 12, how many are still alive?
Let me see. Maurice Ralston is deceased. Alfred Williams is deceased. And Robert Thacker recently passed. 3. And Ronald Hayden. 4.
Okay. I've got a really good question here from a teacher. She says, what was the common feeling among you? Did everyone feel differently about this?
I can't speak for everyone. I had no feelings whatsoever. All of a sudden here I am attending Clinton High School, leaving my friends there in Knoxville, Tennessee. And it's my senior year, and which will be my prom year. And so I was going to miss that. That's the only feeling I had. Other than that, it was a new adventure for me.
So if you had been given the choice, you would have said, I want to stay at Austin High School.
I would have, yes.
But you don't know what the vote would have been.
The problem was that if you did not go to Clinton High School, you would have to pay for transportation to attend another county. My parents didn't have any money to pay to go to Knox County, or for transportation, or to go to the school.
Okay, you wouldn't have seen this article, but I found this in, this was an AP story that ran across the state of Tennessee about the time integration started. There was a group called the Tennessee Federation for Constitutional Government, and they filed a lawsuit to block admission. It didn't matter. But what struck me about this is 8-inch story. And at the very end, it says the group filed the suit is headed by Professor Donald Davidson of Vanderbilt University. And as somebody who has lived in Nashville for a long time and went to Vanderbilt, that the fact that his name appeared there, that took me, that kind of shocked me. I've always known that Donald Davidson was a racist, but this is Donald Davidson, and these are some of the members of the Fugitives, a literary group of poets. This is Robert Penn Warren.
Okay.
And I have these two books here.
Yes, sir.
By Donald Davidson. These are two of the best books on the history of the Tennessee River that you'll ever see. Okay. And I've quoted Donald Davidson before, but I have met people who knew Donald Davidson who say, yeah, he was brilliant, but he was a nasty, nasty racist. But it's weird to see that. Vanderbilt makes a big fuss today about the fact that they expelled Jim Lawson in 1960, but I'm not so sure if this wasn't, if this moment wasn't even more shameful. But anyway, you don't say, there are no statues of Donald Davidson in Vanderbilt now. But anyway, so along comes August 29th, and this is where the stories begin. And starting here, some of the stories I have to chop into 5 bits because they're so long. Okay. This is apparently the site on the first day of school. And when I see this picture, my first question is, was this a hostile crowd, or were these just people standing around looking because there was nothing else to look at?
Some people tell you they weren't hostile, but they were calling us names and etc., yelling and cursing and whatever else. They were hostile to me, I'm sure to the others too. So for those persons who you may speak to, say they were not, but to us or to myself, I can speak for myself, they were hostile.
Okay. And speaking of hostile, we'll go back to the clips in a second. Did you ever meet John Casper or even be in his presence?
I did not, no, sir.
Okay. When you read about this, it becomes very obvious that he was very much at the center of the anger and the organization against, and maybe the bombing, okay? There is a video that I'm gonna recommend everybody Google and watch. It's called Clinton High School and the Law. It was a documentary that was made at this time in the fall. And it's an unbelievably interesting thing. And I think you're in it. But I know, but there's 10 minutes of interview with John Casper. And it's kind of creepy because you sort of think that John Casper is going to be this redneck from the hills, but he's not. John Casper went to Columbia University from the Northeast, and he was the person who came down, and I'm sure there was opposition, but he literally, we'll find it in the FBI thing, he literally went door to door organizing opposition to this. This is, I think that photograph I showed you a couple of days ago was accompanying this article. This was the one on August 28th. Oh, and this is about the first time John Casper, who was only 26 years old at the time, spoke to between 500 and 600 people. Do you have any memory of this specific night, or were you just hunkered down in your house?
I did not attend any of the meetings. My parents and other members of the community, Black community, they attended the meetings. No, I did not attend any myself.
What they're going to find out as time goes on is that Casper was already going directly to your principal and threatening him over this and putting a lot of pressure. You were aware that your principal was being threatened over this. That was in the news.
Definitely so. Yes, sir.
Okay. And this isn't okay. Here's a story about, again, on that first day. On the first day, apparently you were hurried into a side entrance.
No, sir. We went up to the front entrance of the school and we met by Mr. J.D. Britton at the front door, at the front door.
Okay, this was the second day then. This was not the first day then. Do you have any memory of ever going into a side entrance?
No, sir.
Okay, well, maybe this didn't happen. Maybe they had it wrong. And only a few, what was then described as cat calls. There was some excitement when a Negro man walked past the school with a rifle. Police stopped him, and it turns out that he fixes guns. And then there was an elderly woman who was passing the school who was struck twice in the face. Anyway, no arrests were made there. So so there were a couple of incidents. It's going to get worse, but there were a couple of incidents.
Those incidents, I don't remember the person being carrying a rifle and et cetera. It may have, but I never heard that when I was growing up there, when I attended the school. I never heard of that.
So you going into school, you're walking in, and of course, school buildings aren't as secure as now school buildings are locked up. But in those days, they were not locked. But when you were in school, did you feel safer?
Well, I didn't think anything about it. What happened when we entered the school, we were immediately taken to the auditorium, and they were, talking about the school and et cetera. And I did have a occurrence there in the auditorium. A young man turned around and looked at me in the face, and I just stared him down. And I was glad when they signed us to our homerooms, and because I was getting kind of tired of just staring him in the face. I wasn't going to turn around or drop my sight from him. I just kept looking him in the eye. And so, but that was one of my first day there in the auditorium.
Okay, this is the most famous photograph that came from all this. And to the best of your memory, do you think this was on the first day?
Yes, sir. It was the first day. Yes.
Okay. And you seem to be first in line.
I don't know why, but I was.
We talked about this 5 years ago. I put this on the map on the wall, and it was so big that we could read. This is a geometry book that you were carrying. But the thing I remember most of all is I went and pointed at one of the, you didn't hardly know, you say you don't know any of these students.
I did not know any of the students at that time. No, sir, I did not.
And is it silent as you're walking in?
No, it was not silent. From right there where you see me coming up the steps, there was kind of silent, but down below there were cursing and adjuring and whatever. But the students didn't say anything right there.
There's so many things about this picture that are related to race and others, but obviously people dressed better then. But yeah, you look like you're pretty scared to me in that picture.
Well, I was apprehensive, yes, sir.
Okay, and then this is John Casper, and the other person that we're going to talk about is Asa Carter, and I assume you never knew him either.
I did not.
Okay, but some of the detail when the FBI got involved and they started arresting people, they started subpoenaing people and doing testimony. But at some point, it became very clear that that John Casper literally walked in the door of Clinton High School a couple days before school started and told Britton that if he didn't stop this, he was going to get rid of him. Which, to me, that's a threat. But it took a while for the authorities to act. Okay, this is, I think, the second day of school, and it was marked by violence, etc. Looks like 3 people were arrested, none of them students, and I assume you don't. Again, I assume you don't have any inside information about what happened on this particular day.
No, sir.
Okay, and okay, this is something I want to ask you about. Today's student assembly saw a 447-6 vote of confidence recorded for Britton from the parents of students here. And when Britton arrived after the vote was announced, he received the applause lasting several minutes. Do you remember anything about this?
No, sir, I do not.
Okay, of course, it needs to be pointed out that, and then this is way down in the story, 806 students were enrolled at the school. Only 472 showed up on the second day of school. So this is the other side of it. You as an African American student were never, like, why were people not coming, to state the obvious?
I'm sure they weren't coming because of us attending a school, you know, blacks.
Yeah. And again, I'll be glad to send all, but this is, when you look at this, you realize how much newspapers have changed. This is one day story in the Knoxville News Sentinel about this. It was an entire interior page, started on the front page. It just went on and on.
Okay.
This is back when we had newspapers. And okay, is this some photograph?
I know that young man, he went into the service and retired. That's Jimmy Bound. He's deceased now, but he went into the service and spent over 20 years in the military.
Is he one of your colleagues at Clinton High School?
He was a good friend. He did not attend Clinton High School. He was a good friend there in the community.
Was he your age?
Yes, sir.
Okay, I'm going to ask a dumb question. Why wasn't he a student at Clinton High School?
That I can't answer, sir.
So he had dropped out of high school with it.
No, he had not dropped out of high. They moved up from Mississippi, so I can't speak why their parents did not send Jimmy to high school.
Well, this looks like a pretty ugly scene. Okay, and again, and this is all one story. But there's paragraphs in here that explain Anderson County has a relatively small Negro population, and racial segregation has not stirred as much interest here as in other parts of Tennessee, blah, blah, blah. Oak Ridge integrated last year. Other developments in the simmering dispute. Casper, who is obviously the leader, urged his supporters to stop a motorcade scheduled to carry Democratic presidential nominee Adlai Stevenson and Estes Kefauver, who were driving by the high school that day to Norris Dam, just by complete coincidence. And again, you would have no memory of that, right?
No, sir, I do not.
People didn't go out and wave at Kefauver. Okay. Is this the young man you mentioned earlier?
That's not Jimmy there. I'm trying to figure out who that is. I can't see it well enough, but it was not Jimmy Bounds. No, sir.
Okay. Okay, this is what I was talking about. This story came out of the News Sentinel several months later. The reason I'm mentioning is because it discusses what happened in the first week of school.
Okay.
And during the week of August 27th, Casper came to see Mr. Britton, who is your principal. And it says, Casper asked me what I was going to do with regard to getting the Negroes out of Clinton High School. And I said, we weren't going to do anything about it. I said, we were under court order to enroll them. He stated to me that other people in other places had not obeyed the law. I said they were not under court orders. And he finally said he'd get me out of that school before the term was over if I didn't get those Negroes out. And the thing that crosses my mind is Casper doesn't even live in Tennessee. What business, what businesses of this is? But I think we've seen in the last over the years, that doesn't mean somebody that can't show up and raise a fuss. But
correct.
I mean, one of the questions I have is, where was he? I guess you may not know any of this. Where was he staying? What was he doing?
I do not know those questions. No, sir.
Okay. I mean, I live in Williamson County, and we've had trouble at our school board, and half the people that show up to do things don't even live in Williamson County. So I'm going to step back here and make sure that this is working. Can you still see the screen, Bobby?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Integration, or okay, this is an article that ran, another one, and by this time, these articles are being run all over, quite frankly, all over the United States. And this is one that points out that integration has turned Clinton into a place of hatred. And something about the headlines kind of make me, this is a weird headline because the headline implies that it was integration that turned the place into a place of hatred. It really was the response of certain people to integration that turned into a place of hatred. But there were a lot of this. By this time, your life is not the same. Are you basically staying home in your house the whole time at this point?
I did, yes, sir. I was living with my parents. Yes.
Okay. This picture from September 1, this is still the first week of school. Have you ever seen this photograph until last week?
I don't see the photograph you're speaking of. I see the statues. That's all I see.
Okay, we need to get back. We've lost screen share. Let me get it back.
I don't see the picture.
The wonders of Zoom.
Okay, I see the I see the crowd now.
Okay. It's an amazing picture. I assume that when you heard that this sort of thing was happening, you hunkered down in your house.
I never hunkered down. I mean, my parents made sure, and the other parents made sure that the community was well protected. They would make sure that the lights were out in their homes, and sometimes they shot out the street lights. We were hunkered down inside, you know, our individual houses.
But were you getting, like, when this is happening, is anyone official guarding that part of town, or is it?
No, sir, no one was guarding other than the members, men that were living there, the Black men that were living in the community was
Okay.
official gardeners.
Okay, and this is another one. This happened that same, I think these are the weekend after integration took place. I think this is like the first weekend in September. And
I remember that picture because it was a young man who was coming to Clinton to visit a young lady, and I remember him from Austin High School. I can't remember the name right now. Yes, sir. But they were taxing the car, but he was coming to see a friend that he was dating.
Okay, now it's Sunday morning, so this happened on Saturday. The state highway, Frank Clement sent in the state highway, the National Guard. Is that what happened?
I remember that incident well. They were, it might have been a Saturday night. They were downtown. We lived on top of the hill, and we could hear them jeering and whatever. And that was one of the most beautiful sights that I had seen in my life at that point in time. You could see South Clinton, and all of a sudden I saw one red light, two, and all of a sudden there was a bunch. My understanding is that there were 30 cars coming into Clinton that had been sent, you know, the highway patrol. And that was a great night because I felt as though if they had not come in, there were going to be some killing because they were going to come up on the hill and people had dug in and had their guns, and I'm sure we would have been shot and they would have gotten shot. But that was one of the most beautiful sights I can remember, laying out there in that grass, you know, when they came into to the city.
Well, and I'd always heard this version. I'd always heard this story, and what I didn't realize until I started looking through these clips is this was the first. If the violence in Clinton is a sine wave, this was kind of the pinnacle of the first sine wave, and there would be other incidents that would come up, but this was the first. Now, how long would the National Guard be in Clinton?
I think they were there. Well, you know, after the National Guards came in, that was the Highway Patrol.
Yeah.
The National Guards came later. I think they were in the city probably about a week, I imagine.
Oh, okay. And here's more story about the night the National Guard came in, which is the one you just described. And but I've heard other people describe what you just described about how relieved everyone was that the National Guard got sent in. And these are more stories. This is probably the next day. Remember, in those days there were 2 newspapers in Knoxville, the morning and the afternoon paper. So there's just a lot more coverage that we have access to.
Okay.
They banned outdoor assemblies. No outdoor public speeches. Cars will not be parked on any part of the main street, etc. Kind of martial law, really. And then this happens as a result. White students boycott Clinton High School. Of course, some are boycotting already, but then this happened. And on this particular day, September 4th, this is only a week after school starts, 2/3 of the students do not show up. Personal thing, did you say to your mom, I don't want to go to school today?
I never told her that, no, sir.
Okay.
During that time, Alfred and I did a stupid event. We decided not to eat in the school cafeteria. We said we'll go and get us a soda and a hamburger at the Richard Creamery. And I don't know if we were out of our mind, whatever. We started walking through the crowd. And during that time, we got in a fight with a bunch of young men, and the police took us to jail for our safety. And my mom and dad worked at Oak Ridge National Laboratory. My father did. My mom was a domestic worker, and they heard about the events, and they were kind of upset about that. But what they said, they took us to jail for our own benefit, for our own safety. But we should not have gone through that crowd. We should have been more thoughtful about what we were doing.
And you think this was very early in the school year, like early September?
Oh yeah, it was probably about maybe about less than a month that we took that walk.
Honestly, it's funny you say that. I didn't find this mentioned in the paper. You're lucky it didn't make the newspaper. I'm sure that people would have liked to use that against you, but by this time, and I'm gonna, and again, there's other stories that I'll be glad to send these out, but there's a photograph coming up here. Okay, this photograph ran in the Nashville Banner. This is in the middle of all this. We got the Tennessee in the Banner, the two newspapers in Clinton. Okay, this is the high school. Tell me where Foley Hill is.
Foley Hill's on top of, well, let me try to describe it. Downtown, and you would have to walk up a steep hill to get up on top of the hill where blacks were living. Also some whites up there too, but I'm not sure why that Foley Hill got started. When I was growing up, I was just out there in Clinton, but someone started calling it Foley Hill, and I guess it stuck. That's where the blacks were. But there was also some blacks living on the upper part of Clinton that, believe it or not, like Gail Ann Epps, she was not living up on the hill or Foley Hill. So there were blacks living, a little bit, right outside of Clinton, there in the city limits.
Okay, this may be the best photograph I've ever seen of this, because this appears to have been taken on the first day of the so-called white boycott or whatever. And who is this here I'm pointing at?
Joanne Allen. That's Joanne Allen.
Joanne
and myself.
And there you look pretty happy there, Bobby.
No one was talking to me, so they were surrounding Joanne, and no one was speaking to me at that point.
And some version of this photograph was published I found it in the New York Times, I think.
Okay.
And you probably didn't know that, but so there you are. And do you have any memory of this?
I do not. No, sir.
Okay. Same day. And this is going in the start of class. It turns out on that day where the so-called boycott took place, only there were 3 African-American students who did not go to school that day, apparently. For all we know, they were sick. Okay, this is another one. And I think this was certainly the same day, but I wonder who that is back there with you.
That's Joanne Allen there.
Oh, okay. Okay, I'm going to ask a dumb question. You and I are slightly different. You and I are different generations. So I hope this question doesn't offend you. Why are you sitting in the back of the room?
I can't answer that.
Okay.
But she and I both were sitting back there. I don't know.
Okay. I'm
that I cannot answer.
Now, by this time, there's so many stories about this that reporters, as they come in, are trying to do different angles. Which I want to ask you a question.
Sure.
how often did reporters come up to you and say, Bobby, can we talk to you? And if they did, what was your reaction?
No, the reporter did not come to me to ask me anything. I guess
But
they did.
they talked to Alva.
Well, they may have spoken to Alva J. McSwain, but as I said, reporters did not come up to me and ask me questions while I was attending Clinton High or anything else.
If they had, what would you have done? Would you have spoken, or would you say you're shaking your head and walked away?
I probably just told them it was a court order. That's
Okay.
why I was attending. Other than that, that was it.
Well, come to think of it, Robert Thacker is quoted in this. And anyway, but again, this is a story that ran same. We're still in early September here.
Sure.
Okay. And this was taken at that same time period. First of all, I take it you don't know these guys.
I don't know them, but I remember the picture.
Okay.
The picture. Yes, sir.
Are these, you think these are students at Clinton High School?
I'm sure they were. Yes, sir.
So they didn't wear this walk around.
I can't say, I don't want to say, that they weren't, but I assume that they were students.
Okay. But they're not walking around school with these things on, are they?
Not inside the school, no.
Okay.
No,
all right. If everyone attending, if you look up that video called Clinton High School and the Law, one of the people that you'll see interviewed is this young man. Bobby, tell me who this is.
That's Jerry Shaddix. During while I was in school, Sherry and I never talked. Jerry Shaddix and I never talked. But after I had graduated and some years later, I got to know Jerry well. I knew he was a high school star while I was in school. But as far as us carrying on conversations, we did not.
How would you describe the way he acted in 1957?
I mean, he didn't show an animosity towards me. He was a high school star. He kept to himself, and I kept to myself, and we didn't do any, talking.
Well, when I watched the video and they interview him at some length, the first thing I could not believe, and I guess this is a generational thing, as high school football players go, this guy is very literate compared to athletes today. He was answering his question in full sentences, and it's almost like the generation has changed. You don't see, but he, his attitude was that we should be left alone to do this, but to the best of your knowledge, he didn't stand up. Like, there weren't fights where he stood in the middle and pushed people off of you or anything like that, right?
No, sir, he did not. But
okay.
I knew he was a very smart student. I realized that.
And by the way, he's not tuned. He's still alive and well and spends time at the Green McAdoo Center, right?
Yes, sir. He went into the Marine Corps, from my understanding, out to school. He may have gone to college too. I'm not sure, but he's very instrumental in the dedicating the museum there in Clinton. Yes, sir.
Well, I think he's a lawyer now.
He is an attorney, yes.
And if he's tuned in today, then please chirp in on the chat. He may very well be, for all I know. By the way, at last count, we have 23 teachers from Clinton City Schools today. Clinton City Schools only has 3 schools. That's a lot for Clinton City Schools. Okay, so a few days goes back and attendance slowly rises, and right about this time, Casper is accused of inciting a riot, which obviously he's guilty of, but in my opinion, he was guilty of that, but the jury will find otherwise. For most of the rest of September and October, things seem to have calmed down. Am I correct?
I guess so. I cannot remember whether it had calmed down or not.
Well, as looking at the clippings, it seems to me like there's certainly a lot less news about it. And then this happens. He is accused of inciting a riot. He is tried in Birmingham, and he is acquitted. And when he's acquitted, you look at these pictures, it's like a war hero is being released from prisoner of war camp or something. And according to the clips, the newspaper clips, that started the next wave. And again, this all do you remember, I guess this is right around Thanksgiving. It seems to get much worse. Do you have any memory of this?
Well, as far as my memory, it was worse than the whole year. So I
You don't have memory of it going up and down, but it looks like, well, hurling eggs. Was anyone throw an egg at you?
No, so that was the young ladies that were attending school, blacks, young ladies, but they no, I never, no one ever threw an egg at me. No, sir.
Now you hadn't. Let's raise another question. How many fights did you get into your senior year of high school?
Well, what happened was one day I asked my teacher if I could go and speak to the principal, and she said sure. But what happened, I walked out of the school and I went home. And when my parents came home, they wanted to know why I was why I was there at the house. I said I quit school. They said, what? They said, what are you going to do? They said, one thing, we're not going to sign for you to go into the service, and you have your brothers and sisters. You're going to have to go back. And the alderman came up to talk to me later on, maybe the next day or whatever. And I told them, if I go back to Clinton High School, I would not be the same Bobby Cain. And I hope they understood what I was saying. So when I did go back, if anyone came up and said something to me, I was ready to fight. It didn't matter. But I guess I lucked out and didn't get put out of school. But like one day I was going into the restroom and the janitor was coming out and he did something. I just grabbed him. He was an older man. I tried to break his back.
You said the janitor? The janitor?
Yes. And I guess he thought he was supposed to come out, but first, whatever. And then later on, his son came up to me and I told him what I would do to him. And he backed off and he reached in his pocket. I told him, I have mine. I sure hope you have yours. But I didn't really have the knife on me at that point in time, but I did carry one while I was hiding. But if anyone came up to me after I went back to school, it was a fight, period. Whether we actually got into an actual fisticuff or whatever, I was ready to go to war because I felt that this was my mechanism to make this school year.
Meanwhile, you're supposed to be paying attention in class. I guess that's kind of interfering, or is it?
Oh, I paid attention in class, but when you're walking down the hall, someone push you, I turn around and push the person back. Man, I've been the right one, but no one bothered me in my classroom, but no one bothered me in the hall. But like what happened when we went to PE, Maurice and I did not realize this, but when we went in to take a shower the first time, what they did, they flushed the commode and it would make it extremely hot.
Yeah.
So we ran out and we couldn't find anyone. So later on, what we started doing, when we would take our showers after PE, one would watch, and the other would shower, the other would watch while the other person would shower. So that's what we had to protect ourselves and flushing the commode and burning us. But it was several events and stuff that was happening there, but I was not the same person.
Well, this is probably a reference to you. Maybe one of the Negro boys went home after complaining that he was unable to take being bothered and molested in the halls of the school. This might have been you.
It could have been me. It could have been Robert. It could have been Alfred or Maurice. So I'm not sure.
Okay. And then you start to read this, and I don't know whether this was just reporters looking for a story, but in late November, there is talk in the press of all of you being disenrolled and being sent back to Austin High School.
I don't know anything about that.
Okay. I'm wondering if they weren't just looking for various,
I'm sure they were.
But first of all, the court had ordered it, so that was that. But at some point, the Anderson County Board of Education even offers to pay to send, okay, and here's one, November 29th, for the second day in a row. Bobby Cain, 16-year-old senior, said he and 4 others started to school but turned back when they saw a truck filled with white people parked near the building. We got within 2 blocks of the school, saw the truck, and just decided to turn around and come home. This was a long time ago. Do you remember this?
Vaguely, very vaguely. Yes, sir. Very vaguely. Yes, sir.
Okay. And again, I think looking at the clips that some of this happened that week because of excitement and Casper being acquitted. Because before Casper was acquitted, he had to stay out of Clinton, and I think he now could come back.
Okay.
And this is what I mean. There were stories all over the place that implied that you might be transferring. And let's see.
My parents were not going to transfer me back to Austin.
Your parents weren't?
No, sir. And I don't think the other parents were going to transfer their children back to Austin. I don't know where this story came about.
Well, it was, like I said, it may have been an overstated story. This is the day that you went to school and started to school and came back, because 2 days later, there's this wave of stories saying, pay no attention, they're not going to disenroll. This one is in the news, in the Tennessean. Mr. Herbert Allen, orderly at the Oak Ridge Hospital and the father of Joanne Allen, said that it boils down to one question: is the Negro a citizen of the United States or isn't he? And we might as well find out right now. Allen said that under no circumstances would he return his child to an all-Negro school. Your mother said, as far as I'm concerned, my boy is going to continue to go to Clinton High, and I don't know of any other Negroes who intend to withdraw. Okay, and then December 3rd, there seems to be some implication. You actually stay out of school on December 3rd, and then this happens. Okay, you finally go. I think it's on December 4th, after this awful week. And tell me what happened here.
Well, to be honest, I think that was a turning point to get assistance, National Guard or the state troopers. Reverend Paul Turner came up on the hill and he walked with us to school. And what happened to Reverend Turner after we had gone into the school, on his way back to his church, by him being a prominent member there in the community, he was jumped and beaten. And that's, I think, you don't want anything to happen to anyone, but that event was a turning point. That's when the governor sent in the National Guard, the state troopers, and later on the National Guard. To me, he was a turning point that where we were getting assistance from other sources like the police department, the state troopers, and the National Guard. I hate that happened to him, but that was a turning point as far as I was concerned.
I'm logistically asking about that day. So everyone would gather and kind of go to school together. And
yes, sir. Up on top of the hill, we walked down to school. Yes, sir.
Okay, and there are quite a few stories about him, and I only have a couple here, but okay, and that happens coincidentally at the same time, and you may not remember this because I don't think high school seniors pay attention to school board elections, but did you remember this, that there was an election that day?
No, sir, I did not.
Okay, there was an election and there were some ardent segregationists on the ballot, and they lost badly in the election. And that was the same day that Reverend Turner was attacked by a group of white men after he escorted 6 Negroes, and I take it you were one of those 6?
Correct.
And I mean, this is 4-1 is a pretty decisive election. And again, this is where the FBI gets heavily involved, and they probe. So at this point, students, your fellow classmates, some of them are being taken aside and talked to by the FBI. Were you talked to by the FBI?
I was not talked to by the FBI, no,
sir. But did people tell you that they were?
We never talked about it. No,
Okay.
sir.
Because some of them will be subpoenaed, for heaven's sakes. And again, these are long stories. And okay, after the Reverend Turner, there was a couple of days where where the students stayed away. They went back on December 8th, and I understand that things had changed. Now, when was it that you were invited to Highlander?
Well, during the school break, I don't know how it came about, but they invited us down to Highland Highland School. And I did not know Miss Parks at the time, but she was a part of that group down there at the time.
Yeah.
But they had some students to come up from Nashville, and so we met down there and talked, etc. And all. But she was a part of that group. Miss
So
Parks. I did
this,
not know that.
you
know
think
her.
this was the fall, or you think this was Christmas break?
It was a Christmas break.
Okay, so this is not a bad time to put this in. Just to clarify to everyone who's watching, that's Rosa Parks. These are, Bobby, you're right. These are all Clinton people, right?
I didn't see Miss Parks on that picture right there.
Yeah.
That's a mom. That's a mom.
Wait a minute. That's not Rosa Parks?
No, I don't think so. I can't see it that well, but I don't think that's her. Do you have another picture of it?
Well,
It could be her, but I thought that was one of the students' mom, but that didn't look like her.
well, it may be that someone's typing in. I've always assumed that's her.
And it could be, but I just don't. It doesn't look like that's Miss Parks to me, but it could.
You know,
be.
if it's not Rosa Parks, that would explain why you said that you didn't speak to this person at this event.
Yeah, but she was there. She was definitely there.
Oh, she was. Okay.
Yes.
Okay. Now this is something I didn't know. So Christmas break comes because, okay, somebody starts setting off explosions in Clinton. And as it turned out, yeah.
What happened with that explosion was at the local tavern where people would gather, like on Saturday nights or whatever, and they bombed the tavern. And some of the men were down there, believe it or not, they said they were outside shooting dice, and they say they saw the person when they said it there and everything, and no one was injured and all, but they were down there, doing a vice, and they saw it.
Well, but these are just happening in the like over Christmas break, and this is a story I found in the Knoxville Journal on January 5th of 57, and it says that this is the third time that there has been an unexplained dynamite explosion in Clinton. We assume it's connected to the racial controversy, but we don't know. This is a blast that knocked out a window in the home of bank cashier Joe Brown. I don't know.
That was in a white. That was in a white area there. I don't know about that.
But these are explosions that are going to go unsolved, as is the case with almost all these civil rights era explosions. Do you remember being woken up in the middle of the night?
The one that I remember, it was when they blew up the tavern. I don't know about the others. That's the only one I remember there in the community. It might be some others outside of our community, but that was they destroyed the tavern.
Well, it says here that one of them went off below a bridge and causing negligible damage. Yeah. Okay, then this happens. I know that you remember the reporter approaching you and interviewing you for this, right?
Yes. As a matter of fact, for the booklet, for the magazine that you got for me to restore the one I lost in the flood. Yes, sir.
Well, who was this reporter, and what do you remember about George McMillan?
All I know, he came to the house and approached us for the interview. We did not realize, about asking for money for interviews that would have been done. He never offered us any money either, so I'm sure he made a lot of money off this particular article. And so my parents and I, we didn't realize about asking for money for interviews. But
I think what you're telling us is that at the time, people accused you of taking money for this.
We did not receive any money for the article, period.
Absolutely not. I mean, typically, at least in my lifetime, people don't get paid when they're
That's right.
profiled.
Yeah.
But
He
it
probably
sounds like people accuse you of taking money for this.
Well, again, Macmillan may have gotten some money for the article himself.
Yeah, he got paid.
But
Yeah.
my parents did not get any money for this article, period.
Yeah. Well, but this is Collier's Magazine. This is a big deal. And from this moment on, and this was published in November. I think that from the time this came out, you're probably you're the best known of the 12. You might not have been before, but you were now. Oh, and by the way, teachers, the contents of this article can be found on the internet, and I'll be glad to send people a link to this. There's a good detail in the article. I was able to round up an issue of Collier's. I think I had to pay negligible price for it, but you have to know where to look for it. But the contents of this article can be found online, the article itself. Okay. According to newspaper articles, things died down again a little bit. I'm not sure if they died down for you, Bobby, but this is an article in February. And then, okay, maybe we can talk about this. In May, by the time May comes, we've just jumped several months ahead. A couple of students have left. Can you say much about this?
Oh, well, the Allen family, Joanne Allen, they left. The parents left and went to California, and later on, the McSwain left and went to California. They moved away.
Was it because of the violence, or is it because their dad got a better job?
They never told me why they moved away. They may have spoken to someone else, but all I know that they had moved away.
There's something about this article that bothers me, and this is as a person who's worked in newspapers for several years. It's the headline. It says Clinton High Negro pupil quit school. First of all, she didn't quit school. She simply transferred from one school to the other. But also, when a high school student leaves a school, it's not because she's quitting, it's because her parents have moved. The implication, it's just a terrible headline. And I'm sure that it bothered her over the years.
I'm sure they were tired of the incidents that they were receiving and decided to move further.
I did notice that it says somewhere in here that they moved to an undisclosed place.
Well, we knew that they moved to California.
I know, but they didn't say where in California in these articles.
Okay.
Okay. And by this time, you're about to graduate.
Well, let me tell you an incident that kind of helped me for people to speak to me temporarily. During the spring, the football coach had a parent off of running a 100-yard dash, and he paired me with the local track store there. And when the event, on your mark, get set, go, at the end, I had beaten him. And it spread throughout the school that I had beaten the local track star there at Clinton High. And people did come up to me and said, Bobby, I hear you had beaten so-and-so and this and that. But that was the only time that they really had talked to me, period.
But big picture wise, and this needs to be asked, why didn't you play sports for Clinton High School? Naive question.
Well, they said we could come out and go out for the team. I was not going to go out there and get beat up and do whatever, and the other school were not going to play against us. That was a kind of asinine to do that. I was not going to go out there. Not either the other young men, black, were going to go out there and get beaten up and not being able to play. That didn't make sense.
So when you graduated from high school, May 15th or so.
No, May 17th. May
17th, 1957. I told you this the other day. It appears to have been an item in about 300 newspapers. I pulled this one out of the stack. I don't know where Wellsville, New York is, but you're on the top of the front page of the Wellsville Daily Reporter. And there were newspapers in Kansas and Washington and California. You obviously didn't know this.
My graduation day was a terrible day for me, or night.
Why?
Told my dad to come around and pick me up after the event was over because I had to turn in my cap and gown. He was a little late coming around, and so there were some young men who came into the cafeteria where we were turning our cap and gown, and they said, we're going to beat you up and all of this. I said, why is it that every time I had an encounter with you all, it was all more than one? So they cut the light out, not thinking what was going to happen. All of a sudden, I heard someone had gotten hit. So they immediately turned the light on. They thought it was me. It was another classmate of mine. And then they turned the light out again, and I got hit upside the head. So when they turned the light back on, I just started swinging at whomever, whether it was those young men or classmates. They turned the light out again. So, it didn't take a rocket science what to do. So I fell on the floor. And so finally, my dad came around and I turned the cap and gown in. So we went home. And when I got to the house, believe it or not, I was upset. I broke in the house and ran in and I got the shotgun. And they wrestled the gun away from me and everything, because I was going to shoot anyone that came over that hill did not look like me, period. Because I felt like I had been done some injustice at my graduation and etc. But I'm glad my dad and them, my dad wrestled the shotgun from me. But I was just totally upset because that was supposed to have been one of my greatest days of my life, graduating from high school. And here is, I'm being attacked. And I was just upset, period.
Pretty amazing story. One of the things that crosses my mind is something you just said. During the entire year, people might have had a stick or a small knife, but people didn't bring guns to school. It was pretty ugly, but to the best of your knowledge, no one brought a gun to school. Am I right?
No guns, but I'm sure people carry a knife. And I even carried a knife, but I made sure that if one reported me, I didn't have it on me.
Well, and the irony is, and it's kind of a sad irony, publicity-wise, this was the most important day of your life. I mean, just 300, it's amazing, but I'll continue the thought. I then did a search under your name, and you go on to have a great career, but not in the newspapers. And this is one of the stories that this ran in the Waterloo, Iowa Courier, the day of your high school graduation. It's been a rough year. I wouldn't want to repeat it. When asked if he's sorry that he'd gone to the integrated school, he said no. Bobby Cain, one of a group of Clinton Negroes who until this year attended Austin High, has done reasonably well in school this year. Quote, I haven't made really good grades, but this last semester I brought them up a little. Well, I plan to work this summer and then go to A&I State, which is now Tennessee State University. I plan to take social studies or something like that. Well, okay, tell us what you did after Clinton High School.
Well, what happened after Clinton High School, I went into the service. I was drafted into the service. First of all, I went to work at Oak Ridge National Laboratory as a laboratory trainee. Then I received a draft notice, and I went into the service and I spent 2 years there, and came back out and went back to Oak Ridge. I had married at the time. My wife and I had gotten married, and so what happened when I reported to my duty station there in Spokane, Washington, they passed a law about if you've been married, you wouldn't be drafted. So I went to my commander immediately the next day or after the weekend. I asked him if I could get a release from the service. He said, yeah, after you have done your 2 years. So it didn't work for me. So I'm kind of glad I did the 2 years because of a lot of things I had benefit from it. And then after I got out of service, was discharged there in Spokane, Washington. My wife taught school there in Spokane too for a year. She came up from Nashville. She quit school here in Nashville and came out to Spokane. And then we came back to Nashville. And then I worked for the state of Tennessee, and I went back into the active reserve. and I graduated. I retired with the Army Reserve, and my wife also got a teaching job in Nashville.
Your wife was a principal.
Yes, she was there at the end, principal at White Creek High School, assistant principal. But she was at several schools before she went to White Creek. She opened up White Creek when it initially was open, and she was a teacher there in health and physical education. In later years, she was promoted as assistant principal at White
How
Creek.
recently was it that you got out of the Tennessee National Guard?
1993.
Okay.
It was Army National Guard, not the
Army
Tennessee.
National. Okay, I'm going to go back to the presentation. Okay, can you see this headline, sir?
Yes, that was after I had left Clinton High School. My brother and sister was attending school there then. I was at Tennessee A&I State University at the time.
Well, so you're at Tennessee State, and you get a phone call about this. How did you hear about this, in the news or in the?
My parents called me.
Okay, what did your parent? I mean,
They just said the school had been bombed.
it wasn't. This wasn't one bomb. This was a series of bombs that completely destroyed the high school.
Yes.
Curiously, it happened a year and a half after you graduated. And
I don't remember the time frame, but it did happen. Yes, after I had graduated.
It's weird when you hear it, you think it happened in the middle of this. It actually happened much later. Obviously, for a couple of days, this is the talk.
Okay.
And then when this happens, the students at Clinton High School, where do they go to high school for 6 months?
They re-innovated the school there in Oak Ridge, Tennessee, and they were transported down to Oak Ridge. In my understanding, when the student arrived the very first day, they had the Oak Ridge High School band to meet them there, and they played for the students as they went into the school. Clinton's, played for the Clinton students.
Wow. But anyway, this is a central event in the history of Clinton.
It's about 6 miles from Clinton to Oak Ridge.
But I'm talking about the bombing, and this bombing was never solved.
Okay, right.
Like so many of the bombings that took place. I've got a friend who's written a book about the unsolved bombings of the Civil Rights Movement. She focuses mainly on what happened in Nashville, but there's a weird theme of unsolved bombings of the Civil Rights Movement. When Clinton High School was bombed, suddenly Clinton High School is in the news again, and there was this is an amazing column by a columnist named Drew Pearson, and about it. And this ran in practically every newspaper in America. And I thought this was an interesting thing. By that time, people are getting fed up with the fact that President Eisenhower is being so silent on the violence. But okay, and now I'm gonna, for teachers, I want to close out this presentation with telling you something unbelievably weird. Bobby, you told me that you'd not heard this we talked about this the other day, and you said you'd not heard this part of it, right?
Yes, sir. Correct.
Asa Carter, who is one of the two main instigators of the nastiness in Clinton, became a speechwriter for George Wallace in the 1960s. Although George Wallace later denied meeting him, but you can believe that if you like. But he was influential in Alabama and elsewhere in the Civil Rights Movement. At some point, he vanishes off the face of the earth as far as the publicity is concerned, and he changes his name. He moves to Texas, changes his first name to Forrest after Nathan Bedford Forrest, and started claiming he was a totally different person. And he began writing books, one of which was called The Rebel Outlaw Josie Wales, later made into a movie starring Clint Eastwood called The Outlaw Josie Wales. Forrest Carter also made up a backstory. He claimed to be part Cherokee, which members of the Cherokee tribe vehemently deny. And when Forrest Carter died in 1979, by this time it had come out that Forrest Carter and Asa Carter were the same person. This is a story in the Anniston Star. He was from Anniston, Alabama. And this is a story about it. This is probably the weirdest footnote of the civil rights movement I've ever seen. One of his books was, people didn't realize who he was. One of his books made it onto Oprah Winfrey's Book of the Month Club. People didn't realize who Forrest Carter was. Yeah, and yet this is the guy that heavily influenced your life, Bobby.
I didn't realize that. Okay.
Yeah. So, okay, this when were these statues unveiled?
I think you would ask me the date and time, but it was probably, I guess, about what, 10 years ago, 15 at the most.
Yeah. Well, they're right behind you, so there's no reason for us to not go. You're this one here, aren't you? Is that you on the left? Which person are you in
I'm
this?
the one that's carrying the books there on the left.
Okay, yeah, that's you.
On the right hand side, I'm the person there with the book in his left arm.
Yeah.
My left
Now,
hand.
it must. Does your family still own real estate, own the house in Clinton?
Yes, we still own the home. Yes.
How often I guess you still have family and friends there? Or?
My sister and brother, they go out, they live in Knoxville, and they go out to Clinton. They still attend the church there in Clinton, out Asbury United Methodist Church. And so, they look after the things. I go up periodically, but not often.
Okay, I am going to try. We have a lot of people tuned in, and I'm going to ask if anyone, I just lowered the hands figuratively on Zoom. Is there anyone that would like to ask Bobby a question? And if so, I'm going to try to promote you to panelist so you can ask verbally. Just raise your hand if you want. This is how we have to do things. We're in public education, right? While we're talking, I'll tell you, Bobby, when you and I first met, you may remember this, we realized after we talked that we had a mutual friend in Brian Stewart.
Yes, correctly. Yes, sir.
Yeah.
He's a fraternity brother. Yes, sir.
Yeah, he's a different generation than you, but he taught high school math across the hall from me when I taught at Hillsborough.
Oh, I didn't realize. I know you told me that at that time. I didn't realize it.
Yeah. Does anyone, I know there's some people from Clinton, Tennessee here today. And if you'd like to tune in, just feel free and ask a question. If you don't want me to, I don't have to put you on the screen. If you don't think you're presentable today. Sharon Copeland says, I spent time every summer in Clinton and never knew about this. There was somebody who emailed me in advance who had a backstory that was connected to Bobby. If that person is still tuned in, feel free to raise your hand and I'll make you a panelist at this point. But let me ask you a question. This happened in 1957. So through the 60s and through the 70s. Okay, we do have one question. Let me get to it. It says, were there any white people who offered any kindness to you?
No, sir.
None.
None.
What about Mr. Britton?
I'll have to say Mr. Britton was a person who met us with kindness. He was very jovial. If it hadn't been for Mr. Britton with that smile and the way he received us at that first day, I don't know how we would have felt, but I can say that he received us with open arms.
So there's one, Mr. Britton.
Yes, that's it.
Wait, so what about teachers? Are we talking?
I had, the teachers never showed any animosity towards me. I'm speaking for myself.
Yeah.
If I held up my hand, they would recognize me, but I can't speak for anyone else. If it had not been for the teachers who were kind and receptive, that helped me tremendously to get through Clinton High School. Later years, I bet 50 years later, when I met the people and that were doing a museum, people offered, apologies and whatever and all, but that was later years. But during that time at Clinton High School and up until about 50 years, when they start talking about the museum, no one said they were sorry, period.
We had Ray Smith on about 2 months ago, and Ray told me something that I'd not heard before about Mr. Britton. Do you know anything about Mr. Britton's death?
I know he committed suicide, my understanding.
Okay. Yeah, Ray told me, and Ray's pretty reliable. He said that both Mr. Britton and Reverend Turner met their deaths by suicide.
That's correct. Yes, sir.
Okay, that's an unbelievably tragic footnote to this. In the 1960s, in the 70s, and the 80s, how often did people know it was you? Was this something that just you kept to yourself for 35 years? It wasn't.
I never talked about the incident, and what happened was my daughter had to do a paper at the school, St. Pius X, and my wife told us to do a paper on your dad, and she didn't know anything about it because I never talked about it openly, and she did, and believe it or not, people still don't know about this incident that happened at Clinton because we never, the 11 of us or the 12 of us never talked about the incident, period, until about 50 years later when we met and they were talking about doing a museum. We never had any meetings, what happened, or what they did to you or what they have done to others. We never talked about that. We went our individual ways, and we didn't see each other for about almost 30 or 40 years later, although I would go to Clinton and some had moved away and whatever. And we never talked about our ordeal there at Clinton High School, period.
Which raises another question. In 1957, you go to Tennessee State University, and the civil rights movement is beginning when you're there. What we typically consider like the sit-ins and everything. And you've answered this question to me before, but I want you to answer it again. Why didn't you take part in the sit-ins? Not that
because I would not have met their ideology. I mean, you had to go there and take spitting and hit, and you couldn't fight back. So when I was not going, I understood what they were doing.
Yeah.
And I would chide and say, continue. But I was not going to do it because I would interrupt what they were trying to do, because I would hit you back. Non-violent. I was not into that non-violent.
And I don't know did you talk to Jim Lawson about it, or?
I didn't talk to Reverend Lawson or anyone else about it. I didn't bring it up while I was at TSU.
Well, I think you'd already paid your dues, but looking back, Scott Ray has a question. Looking back, would you have done anything differently?
Well, if they had not said I had to go to Clinton High School with a court order, I would not have gone. Period.
Yeah. Did you meet anyone in college who had a similar high school experience regarding desegregation of schools?
They didn't know. They did a paper there at Tennessee A&I when I went there and etc. But after that, I didn't talk about it, or nor did we bring it up. But they did do a paper there when I enrolled at Tennessee A&I. Other than that, I didn't talk about it. Period.
This is a lengthy question from somebody.
Okay.
Says Margaret Anderson, Selden Llewellyn, and Eleanor Davis were all Clinton teachers who spoke about integration or who wrote books and did interviews in later years. Do you have any memories of those people, those ladies, and how they impacted your experience? Yeah,
they were great teachers, and I admired each one of them. And they showed me kindness, and they were very cordial to me. They were excellent teachers, yes, sir. So
it needs to be pointed out that when you say there were no white folks who were kind to you, you're talking about the students.
Well, I mean, the student didn't talk to me. I'm not saying they weren't kind. They didn't speak to me. If that was kind or not. And the people outside the school, they didn't show me any praises or whatever. So I said they were not kind, period.
How many children do you have? I know one of them. I know a daughter.
I have one daughter. She's an attorney.
What was their reaction over the years? Well, first of all, were you one of these parents who told them this over and over again, or did you not talk about this very
I
much with
did
them?
not talk about it. As I said, she had to do
Really?
a paper. And my grandson, recently, he's a senior this year at Father Ryan High School. He did not know it either. And he did he did an article at the school when he was at St. Pius, and he did a paper. And he
interviewed you this year for senior.
and he also interviewed me this year for a senior project. I mean, I never talked about it. Yeah.
Just tell Renee got you started.
And
Your niece, Renee.
Renee got me started in terms of
Public speaking.
public speaking.
On the weird connections that you have with people, my son, who's a junior at UT, I had to think about that, played a basketball game against your grandson and about 5 years ago. And I was sitting there, I looked to my left and I'm like, that looks like Bobby. What would he be doing here?
Oh, that's right. Yes.
Oh, yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, your grandson at that time could not cover my son, but there was about a 4-year differential between them. That was a long time ago.
Okay.
Somebody said, I had the privilege of working many years with Alfred Williams at Clinton Elementary School. I also met with Joanne Allen Boyce and talked with her several times. We have her book called This Promise of Change. So
yes, sir. I have the book. Yes, sir. The school there in Knoxville, Tennessee, who I spoke to, the Beardsley Elementary, they sent me that book. Yes, sir. I have a copy.
in light of today's racial climate, what would you advise people today? What would you like to leave with us?
Well, that has to be an individual from each person, because what I would tell them to do today, they might not think is the right thing for them. So, it's kind of hard to tell people what to do and what not to do. They're gonna have to take it upon themselves what they wish to do. Cause sometimes when a person look at me with this gray hair, and they would say, well, can you tell me what to do anyway? So I don't try to chime in too much, trying to tell a person what to do. So that's an individual choice.
I want to also point something out to people who are watching today. You've not been there. There are a lot of people who've capitalized on their fame in this regard, but you've not been somebody who has sought the limelight on this. A few years ago, I tried to talk you into letting me talk Vanderbilt into honoring you at a football game, and you didn't want to have anything to do with it.
That's right.
Yeah.
I have not been one to capitalize, whether for public speaking or whatever else. I have gone out to speak to different high schools, and I have gone up to Illinois. My niece had me to come up there and speak to some high schools up there, but I have not done a whole lot other than you.
Yeah. Somebody has asked this question: what is your next public event? And I think I know the answer is, but you answer that question.
Well, it's what I'm doing now. I mean,
Yeah, you don't have a public event schedule.
No, sir.
Yeah, I think it would probably mean the next Tennessee State football game. We're sure you'll be there.
Basketball now, yes.
Oh,
sir.
you do basketball too?
Yes, sir, we do.
Yeah, and you're wearing a coat and tie today, but I want everybody to know that the first time I met you for lunch at Sweats, you were wearing a TSU jersey, and my first thing I said to you was, "Do you have any eligibility left?"
I wish I had that, but I'm a staunch Tennessee Tennessee State University alumnus.
Yeah. Okay, well, it is 5:22, and I'm gonna shut us down in a couple of minutes and see if anyone else has any questions or comments. Again, if somebody wants me to make you a panelist, I'll be glad. Everyone seems shy, but we are getting a lot of questions.
And one from my niece there, what she said he was invited to speak at.
Oh, that's your niece.
Yes, sir.
Where does she do?
She's worked for AT&T and some others. She has a degree in what is it, Renee? Computer science.
Really?
Master's, yes, sir, from Howard. So
wow.
Yeah. She graduated from Tennessee State too.
Your dad worked at Oak Ridge?
He worked at Oak Ridge National Laboratory and Animal Husbandry, and I worked at Oak Ridge National Laboratory Y12 as a laboratory trainee. Yes, sir.
A teacher named Terry Curley has written this in. I had the pleasure to talk to Bobby at Green McAdoo several years ago. He stated that his home was damaged in the Nashville flood. She's asking about that, and that's a long story. Tell us
That was
what's going on with that.
2010. That was 2010. We lost everything through the flood. And then we were flooded again in 2017. So we're doing okay. We're trying to get back, although our contractor kind of got us for some money and et cetera, but we're doing okay.
Okay. But it's not a good thing, but
No, it isn't.
no. Okay. All right. Well, let me tell you, it's been a pleasure to talk to you today. And we've had about 100 people tuned in at various times. And I told you this earlier. This one is one of the few I've ever recorded.
Okay. I want to thank you for the invite and the invitation to speak to the teachers that you have registered, and also thank you for the invite.
You're very welcome. This has been an honor. It was an honor 5 years ago. It's an honor today. So, all right. Well, I'm